Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Death Note Part 1, Episode 20, Makeshift. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens within this episode. So we start this episode off where the last one left off, with the cameras having now been installed and the task force being able to witness a board meeting for the Yotsuba group, and it is noted that only 7 out of the 8 are present. We learn that, so at the end of the last episode, one of the Yotsuba group wanted to quit being part of the meetings, and then he quickly realized that that was going to kill him and he tried to change his mind. However, at the start of this episode, we find out that there's only 7, not 8, implying that the one who wanted to quit in the last episode is most likely dead at this point. And the group kind of at the start of their meeting says, take this as a lesson. If you try to quit or get out of these meetings, you're done, essentially, with life. So keep that in mind. They then go on to discuss who they want to kill, and they also go over a report from Iber, who has been posing as the Detective Coyle, one of Elle's aliases, and had sent a report which did not reveal Elle's identity, but let them know that the detective had noticed the pattern of killings to Yotsuba's benefit on the weekends, and that they might want to slow that down or scatter it or stop that because that's a pattern that Elle would be able to notice. And they decide on their next kills. This, of course, leads to a bit of an disagreement. Soichiro and Light want to, now that they have this video for confirmation, Matsuda's overhearing, eavesdropping of them talking about who to kill in the last episode, wants to basically run over to the Yotsuba group and arrest all 7 of them, stop the murders that they're planning from happening, and save those individuals. Elle is taking the more logical approach, which is that it is more important to prioritize catching Kira and finding out how Kira kills to prevent any future murders, therefore saving potentially thousands of lives, versus saving these few but potentially not catching Kira properly, or not being able to find out how Kira kills and therefore not being able to stop a future Kira from appearing in the world, and of course going on more of a killing spree. And since they have this evidence and they are this close, he wants to take advantage of that. This leads to a bit of a split, and Light, trying to create a compromise of sorts, phones the one that they all agree is the least likely to be Kira in the group, and he basically poses as Elle and asks for this member to delay the killings as much as possible by at least hopefully 1 month, and in exchange, once they know who Kira is, they will not arrest the remaining board members, they will only arrest Kira. And then, of course, if Kira wins and does manage to kill Elle, well, then he's still cushy in his board seat, and so either way he would win, but the only way he doesn't win is if Elle has to go in and arrest all of them, because then he will be one of the ones arrested. And so after hanging up the phone, he then presents to the board the idea to have Coyle continue investigating Elle, and because Coyle has noted the pattern, Elle might also see that pattern, therefore he suggests delaying the murders by a month and giving Coyle a month to find Elle's identity, and if he can't in the first month, then they'll kill one, and then they'll wait another month, and once Elle is dead, then they can go back to killing as much as they want to, because once Elle's off their back, they won't have anything to worry about because the police force has already pulled back and decided not to investigate Kira going forward. The other board members agree to this, and back in the task force, Elle comments on how Light managed to make a plan that is something that Elle would have come up with, but came up with it faster, and how he also was the one who noticed the pattern with Yotsuba Group before even he did. And he kind of makes a comment on how Elle or Light could actually succeed him as Elle should he die. Light may be able to take over the investigation from Elle's position, and the rest of the task force is like, wow, Light, you've just been so complimented. Congratulations on like earning this recognition. And Light quickly sets them straight that it's kind of a setup from Elle, and he reveals Elle's true thoughts of the fact that Elle basically has determined that Light is Kira, and he's either A, pretending that he's not Kira, but the moment that he's free of suspicion, will return to being Kira. And in that case, he would want Elle's position, and so it was a test to see if he would jump on, you know, agreeing to be his successor and trying to steal his position as Elle. Or option two, that he had been Kira before and had somehow lost his memories and passed the power on, but Elle, knowing how smart Light is, knows he would have had a plan that once he was clear of suspicion, would bring his power back to him, and therefore basically like option one, would then, while being part of the investigation, handcuffed to Elle, would want to steal his position, would want to continue to be part of the investigation, etc., etc. And so that's what he reveals to the task force. And basically at this point, Elle decides that Light really is thinking exactly like he would, but also indicates like that he's not likely to take the handcuffs off anytime soon. And of course, then we go back to the argument with Light and Suichiro on one side wanting to save the few, and Elle on the other side wanting to potentially sacrifice a few in order to save the many by catching the true Kira and finding out how Kira kills. And Elle basically says, we're going to split the investigation. You're welcome to use headquarters and resources, but I'm going to go about it my way. You can go about it your way. He then basically drags Light off because they're handcuffed together and goes to see Misa. And while he's with Misa, he then basically decides to manipulate Misa by having her choose between Kira and Light. And of course, she chooses Light. And so Elle basically says, help me with my investigation by becoming the model for Yotsuba Group. And that'll help Light survive because his and mine fates are tied as long as we are handcuffed together. If I die, he dies, and vice versa. And Misa, of course, agrees to help, wants to help, and they join a group of three, and Misa declares them all to be like best friends. Well, basically, Light's friends are her friends, so even though she didn't like Ryazaki before, now he's her friend, and he's happy he's got another friend. And Light's there, like, basically having to go along with this, even though he's on his father's side, because he's handcuffed to Elle, and now Misa's involved and being manipulated into entering the investigation. And he is worried about her safety because he's, right now, the Light who was not a murderer. And even though he doesn't have feelings for Misa, he still cares about her safety the same way he would anybody else's. And that is how we end this episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened within the episode, it's now time to rank this episode. And as always, we will be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set ranking values to determine the score, and then the personal ranking list, which is basically a number I pull out of the air based on my own opinion. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values, and I highlighted those I felt applied to the episode. So first we have our single arc main character development, and this is worth 2 points. And this, it does impact other characters, but I put it under L because it's his suggestion for the change, and that, of course, is that L suggests that they split the task force with Soichiro going his way and L going his way, though they are going to continue to share the headquarters and the resources that are available there. He, after they have a disagreement on how to investigate, decides to make that split. And that's obviously a pretty big development for the plot and also for the characters. And as Elle is the catalyst for that change and the one to make the suggestion, that is why it falls under his development and is worth the 2 points. Then we have our multi-arc main character growth. And I wasn't sure if I was going to put this as growth or development, but I decided on growth because Elle and Light, having been handcuffed together for, at this point, months, they have gotten to know each other extremely well. So well, in fact, that Light basically is able to read Elle like a book and is able to communicate his thoughts to the rest of the group. And he's even able to act as Elle to call the member of Yotsuba group in a very Elle-like plan, coming up with it himself because they know each other that well. And ultimately, I decided to consider it growth because I feel like it's a growth in that they've gotten to know each other so well and be that in sync with each other that they have come to, like, Light has come to the point where he can basically read Elle's mind and communicate it to everybody else and even reasonably fake being Elle. And I'm fairly certain, were roles reversed, Elle could probably do the same with Light. But I think it shows the growth of the characters as far as how well they know each other, that is possible. And that is why it is falling under growth and not development, and that is worth 4 points, which brings us to 6 points total. I didn't really feel that any others particularly applied, and I also didn't feel that there was any negatives really to this episode, at least that are on this chart. And so the final score will be the 6 out of 10. So our part 1 ranking so far for our mostly objective ranking list is starting with rebirth, confrontation, doubt, wager, decision, execution, ally, encounter, confessions, tactics, friend, pursuit, glare, unraveling, love. This episode comes in 16th, makeshift. Then it's followed by dealings, assault, Matsuda, and then overcast. So now it's time for the personal ranking. And this episode is one where there was nothing overly negative occurring, but it wasn't necessarily the most entertaining episode that has ever existed. There was almost a fight number 2 between Elle and Light. Light basically, after he gives Elle's thoughts, turns his chair around, leans over, looks him deep into the eyes, and was like, "Do I look like the type of person who would be a murderer?" And Elle's like, "Yeah, yeah, you do." And then, of course, Light tries to punch him while Elle tries to kick him, but they're quickly pulled apart. Basically, the fight stops before it even happens, which prevents it from becoming an iconic moment. Though I do think, once again, we have a bit of fan fiction fodder in our canon show there, with that whole turning around looking deeply into each other's eyes for a few seconds there. It was quite fun. So that was a bit of entertainment. There was a lot of talking, then there was, of course, the explanation of Elle's thoughts by Light, and then the split on how to handle the Yotsuba group between Soichiro's side, Elle's side, and Light would normally have been on Soichiro's side, but because he's handcuffed to Elle, ends up on Elle's side. I personally also agree with Elle. His side just happens to be more logical in order to prevent a great number of murders in the future and yet another new Kira from appearing, it does make sense logically that their priority should be finding out how Kira kills and stopping him so that there are no more Kiras and Kira cannot kill again going forward, which will then ultimately save far more people than the 2 or 3 names that had come up in the meeting. Whereas Sorichiro is like, all life is precious, we have to save everybody, so even if it may cost us finding Kira, we need to save these people now that we've seen this recording and know that they're in danger, and should arrest all of the Yotsuba group and then go from there and hope we get lucky and one of them happens to be Kira, and not just know Kira, and we hopefully will be able to, when we capture them and arrest them, figure out how he kills from there. That's leaving a lot to chance. That's hoping to get lucky. And that's also potentially losing out on discovering Kira's true identity or how he kills, and allowing for a new Kira to arrive that they don't know the identity of, that they may not be able to stop or find, and who may kill quite a few more people before they're able to close in on him. So, Sorichiro's side, not the most logical, not the smartest move, though probably the more emotional and empathetic move. Still, I would probably side with L on this one, especially given that L's job is to find Kira, to prevent all future Kira murders. His way of going about it makes sense for what his goal is. And then second half of the episode is pretty much just L going to Misa's room, dragging Light along because they're handcuffed together still, and manipulating her through her feelings for Light into working for them and infiltrating the Yotsuba group as their commercial actress, which has been brought up in the meetings that they've observed, so she has a really good chance of that happening. Now, obviously, I don't like when people use other people's feelings to manipulate others. I'm also not a fan of one-sided feelings. I also think that there is a little bit of hypocrisy that comes across with Misa in this episode because, like, obviously, she gets really excited that she's able to help Light and talk about how, like, maybe save Light's life from the Yotsuba group and how she couldn't live in a world without Light. And while she may respect Kira, she loves Light, which is so much more. All the time, it's been completely one-sided on her part. Then she kisses L's cheek and he says he might fall in love with her, and then she gets all weirded out because it would be one-sided and tells him that they should be friends instead because a friend of Light's will be a friend of hers, and then he goes, yay, I've now got a second friend. But I just think it's a little bit hypocritical that she's totally fine being completely one-sided and forcing her feelings onto Light, but at the prospect that Ryuzaki might end up falling in love with her, one-sidedly, she's completely ewed out, and it's like, just imagine that's how Light feels whenever you're forcing your feelings on him. And this was just L making a joke. You've actually done it. But, I mean, it's pretty brushed off in the series, and I don't think it's something that would be really. Like, I don't think it's a character regression because I feel like it's completely in line for her character. But something I did want to note was a little bit meh. And so while there were some funny moments, most of it was talking, most of it was planning, and then there were a couple of moments that were almost there or just kind of meh. And as a result of that, I felt like this episode was very average. And that is why I scored it as a 5 out of 10, which is a very average score. And so that brings our personal ranking to Rebirth, Encounter, Glare, Execution, Confessions, Doubt, Pursuit, Ally, Decision, Confrontation, Tactics, Dealings. This episode, Makeshift, falls into 13th place. Then Friend, Love, Overcast, followed by Wager, Unraveling, Assault, and so far in 20th place, Matsuda. Bringing us now to our final segment in our series ranking so far, which on our mostly objective ranking, part 1 so far has a score of 149 out of a possible 260, and on the personal ranking side, part 1 so far has a score of 117 out of 260. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Deathnote Part 1, Episode 20, Makeshift. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.